Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Empowered Performance Podcast. I have Brendan McGuigan on the show today. He's got a baseball background. Now he's in endurance events. But if you'd rather share about your background, your athletic background, and how you got into the current training role that you're in, and introduce yourself, Brendan, please do so.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Brendan McGuigan, obviously. Yeah, I grew up playing just like kind of all kinds of sports, baseball, football, hockey, you name it. And then went on, played college and then professional baseball, played at the University of Richmond and then in the Seattle Mariners organization. And then kind of, I guess when COVID shut down our season in 2020, I kind of realized like, at that point, like it had been kind of brewing, like I wanted to get into training post career and kind of go that route. So I took that time, so I had all this free time on my hands to study, take the CSCS, like start actually like investing in that side of things. So kind of transitioned into the training stuff while I was still playing for the next like 2 or 3 years. And like while I was playing, I trained people in off season or remotely in season, things like that. And then when I retired, like the spring, like before spring training in 2023, just transitioned to training full time. So, yeah, but like you said, quickly realized I had nothing to train for the first time in my life and picked up running, and here we are.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. You stay at University of Richmond, Virginia?
Yep.
Okay, I'm from Virginia, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, no way.
Well, is that where you're originally from?
No, so I'm in Austin, Texas. I moved here when I was 4. So I grew up here and
Okay,
then was in Virginia for college and then bounced around in the minor leagues and stuff like that.
that's cool. Yeah, I'm in Northern Virginia, but that's pretty cool. So then I was going to ask as well. First of all, I want to say that we have similar experiences. I was a college athlete. I didn't get to like semi-pro or pro like you did within my respective sport. I was a soccer player. I started coaching in the sport of soccer at high school and club level, and it wasn't my favorite thing in the world. I liked high school. Club I didn't like so much. I'm sure you have your opinions on youth sports culture today.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me. So while I was doing that, I was getting my CSDS at the same time. What was your major in college?
I was a rhetoric and communications major.
Okay.
So yeah, I
Yeah,
was nowhere near. So everything on the training side, I kind of had
it
to,
was tough, right?
yeah, teach myself or
Yeah.
learn from. I was very lucky to have some really powerful mentors and just like through continuing education stuff because I didn't have the formal background in it.
Yeah, I have a cousin who works in this space. He works with some professional soccer players in Europe, in Amsterdam. And I just like used him as a resource. And I just said, "What do you recommend?" And he said, "CSDS is the gold standard. So just go ahead and get that." And
Yep.
I had a marketing background, so like nothing science. I mean, that was tough. I mean, I read that book cover to
Yeah.
cover several times. And, yeah, but I mean, I got it. It's cool, but yeah, it's really hard making that transition. But it's nice. I always cared more about the practical side than the scientific side. But I mean, they both matter, of course. But I find that I'm not talking about the Krebs cycle as much as I am, with stuff like that. So I
No,
find,
definitely.
yeah. So what was your position in baseball?
I was a pitcher.
Pitcher, okay. Which is interesting too, because I ask clients of mine and friends and family if they ever have any questions to ask my guests and all that stuff. And I had one who was very curious. So I have some questions to ask based off, and we'll get to that later in the podcast. So, what kind of training do you do now? You said you train out of a gym. What are all the services you
Yes.
offer?
So for my in-person training, I work at a gym downtown in Austin. It's a big mix. I've got a lot of Gen Pop, some athletes, things like that. And then remotely, it's pretty much all athletes, a lot of runners, a lot of baseball players primarily, just because those are kind of my two disciplines, I guess. Yeah, it's a good mix. I enjoy it. Keeps me busy, but yeah, it's been good.
I find baseball and endurance sports like running and all that stuff, marathons and all that, to be very not opposite, but when I think baseball, I think speed and power. I don't think long distance, running or anything like that. I don't think endurance is the main thing. And I was humbled at. I mean, when I grew up in Virginia, in my area, soccer and baseball were like rival sports. So I was just like, oh man, how hard could baseball be? You guys just get to like sit on the bench and all this, whatever. And then my first coaching experience, I was an intern in Cincinnati, and the Northern Kentucky area is like huge for baseball. So almost every kid I worked with at this like high school sports training facility were like baseball players, and these kids were so fast and so powerful, and it just humbled me at like how athletic they were, but also um, how disciplined they were, how much time they spent pitching, batting, and all that stuff. So really, really talented athletes. But one thing that they weren't the best at was endurance, and they would admit that themselves.
Yep,
So to make that switch, I feel like most baseball players when they retire go to golf because it's rotational power, that kind of
definitely.
stuff. But going into long distance running is like one of the most interesting kind of switches that I've seen. So yeah, if we could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the pitching side, it's just
Mhm.
I mean, people say like throwing a baseball like in the pitching delivery is like the single most violent non-contact event
Yeah.
in sports, right? So it's just pure explosiveness and power, like you said. So yeah, it was very different,
Mhm.
completely different energy systems, everything. Um, but honestly, what happened was it was like the week after I officially retired, and one of my good friends was running the Austin Marathon. And so
Okay.
my wife and I went down there to support and cheer him on. And like everybody running, I just kind of looked at my wife and I was like, I feel like I could probably do this. And she was like, yeah, you probably could. So then the next day I went out and I tried to run and I tried to run 2 miles and I died. Like I was toast. I like had to stop and walk like two different times. I was like, oh my God. And then it became like a challenge. It was like, okay, well, like now I have to prove to myself I can do this. And
Sure.
I like signed up for the race for the following year and ran it. So, um, yeah, it was just, I think, kind of a perfect storm of some good friends who were into the running space here. And then just, yeah, the first time I ever didn't have something to train for. And I
Mhm.
felt that void and wanted something to work
Sure.
towards and like have that goal. So,
Mhm. Yeah. To speak to that, in a similar instance, I went from soccer to jujitsu, which I find are very different sports. I probably had like a 5 year gap where I had nothing but the gym and then like just trying to pick up sports here and there. But the gym to me is supplemental. If it's the main thing, I just don't find it as interesting.
yeah,
And so when I started doing jujitsu, it's like, okay, I have to do these exercises to help me in this context. And it made it, worth it, more enjoyable. But you were saying that you had 2 miles and you had to like prove to yourself. In my second session ever in jujitsu, I got my MCL snapped. Somebody just like twisted my knee in on a snap down on like a takedown. And I just heard it and I felt it. And I just thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, I want to recover from this and I don't want to be scared of this. So I
yeah,
just like told myself I was going to recover as quickly as I could. It's usually about 3 months to recover. It took me about two and a half to feel about 100%. And I've been doing it for almost a year since that injury, and it's been good.
well,
But
that's crazy.
so I find we're like wired fairly similarly in that sense, where it's like if something sucks, maybe it's a pride thing for you, but for me, it's like I don't want to
Yeah,
just give up on it. So yeah,
no, for sure. It's a bit of both. It's definitely like, yeah, don't want to like back down from a challenge, like want to be able to prove to myself I can do that. But yeah, it's funny. I feel like you get into your late 20s and you have a fork in the road. You either go endurance sports or you go combat sports and go to jujitsu route. It's like one of two.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess I started with Muay Thai about a year ago, and then added jujitsu like maybe a month after that. The idea was that like striking's cool, but if like a wrestler or someone gets me on the ground, I don't want to be totally screwed. So then I thought that, and then now I added MMA to the mix, so it's Muay Thai, jujitsu. I have a wrestling class every Friday night, so I'm gonna go after this. But it's just to help cover all the bases in MMA. It's tough. I went to my first like competition just to watch with some of my teammates last weekend, and like it makes me really want to stay away from competing because I mean, one of my teammates got his nose broken and got kicked and then for lack of better words in the manhood, and he started throwing it up. I mean, like not for me. I have a baby coming at the end of the year, and I can't get injured and then leave my wife alone with like a newborn.
Yeah, no
But
kidding.
maybe one day. But it's nice to at least have something, whether it's running or jujitsu to keep you focused and invested in your body and all that. And it's also nice to have different challenges. I think. Sorry about that. People will only focus on one area of their athleticism, and it's the one thing they're good at, and they'll stick at that for like their whole lives. So maybe you would have just stuck with speed and power forever, and then maybe you can't touch your toes, and maybe you can't go for a 2 mile run like you're saying. But there's benefit to being able to do it all. So I think it's really cool that you stepped way outside your comfort zone. Um, Along those lines, how would you have similar training and different training with yourself since you made that switch in sports and also your clients? What's the major similarities and differences?
So I think like just like you're talking about, just building like a well-rounded athlete and human. Like the basic principles are the same. Stretching, movement, quality obviously is going to be a big one. Um, but then based on like what the sport or task at hand is, that's going to obviously shift our focus in different ways. So I feel like right now we're in kind of a revolution in our space with like GPP is king and like everything should just be GPP and skill stuff is the skill stuff. Leave that for the sport.
Mm,
And I think like to an extent that gets you to a solid place because it's going to build like a generally stronger and more powerful athlete. But at the end of the day, like GPP is king just until it's not. Like at some point, like we're going to have to shift our focus to create the specific adaptations that we want for this sport or task. So, um, with my like baseball guys and my running clients, our training at the core like structure of the session will look fairly similar, but obviously like exercise selection and kind of how we're doing it is going to be different. I'm going to do way more contrast training with my baseball guys, and just like straight RFD work.
mm,
Um, a lot more like overcoming isometrics, things like that as primers.
mm,
Don't do a whole lot of overcoming isos with my runners. We do a ton of yielding isos, like trying to build those tendons, things like that. Especially like I feel like especially when they're in a race prep, when you're dealing with runners, half the battle is injury and pain management and just load management in general. It's like a lot less of like a development phase, if that makes sense. So it's like you're saying, it's just supplemental to their running. It's keeping them healthy. It's just assisting it. Uh, so it's just what can we do? How can we find the minimum effective dose that keeps them strong, keeps them healthy, and what can we do to just balance out the fact that they're 100% gonna have different aches and pains that pop up throughout this race prep, and that happens as well in season for different athletes in different sports as well. Um, yeah, I think it just shifts the
sure.
focus and just kind of pull the levers different ways a little bit.
I appreciate that answer. And there's kind of like two different directions we can really kind of dive into. You talked about general versus specific, which is a great topic. And you also talked about minimum effective dose. I guess just to add to the minimum effective dose kind of quickly, I think a lot of strength coaches feel the need to justify the drops. And so they try to do every single thing they can, almost maximal effective dose for their athletes. And then that can actually take away from their performance. And it's a lesson learned the hard way. I learned that the hard way because when I was strength training in college for myself, I was like, what's the most I can do? What's the most training I can do? What's the most individual sessions, the most lifting, the most whatever? And I was just so beat up that I can actually perform come game day and it diminished my performance. So I think it's really important. People should understand if you're lifting for something, that something is typically the main thing. The main thing should stay the main thing. And you should do basically as little as possible as you can to get the desired adaptation you have. If you're trying to get X amount stronger, X amount faster, X amount more conditioned, do as little as is needed. It's still going to be quite a bit in some instances. So it doesn't mean don't do nothing. But once you find the adaptation that you need, you should probably cut it from there so that you don't beat yourself up too much, whether it's, muscle fatigue, neural fatigue. So you just feel kind of tired and slow and all that stuff. So I think it's an important thing to touch on. But then general versus specific, I actually really appreciate you saying this because I found that the space almost feels like it's in two extremes, and there's no happy medium when it comes to the general and the specific side. The general side, you have some people who say that if all you do is squat and clean, you should be able to sprint and change direction, rotate fast, and all that stuff. And some people even demonize like jumping in multiple planes or throwing a med ball or something like that because it's too specific. And why not just swing a baseball bat or like play your sport or something like that? And I think there's still times to do things that are like even that medium-ish zone, even sometimes very specific things. And on the flip side, you have some people that are getting so specific they're attaching bands to like their waist and dribbling a basketball up and down the court, or like a band on a tennis racket and going through a swing. And like I feel like they're missing it. They're going a little bit too far.
Definitely.
So I imagine your programs are maybe I'm just gonna guess, but 70-80% the same. There's no such thing as a baseball specific squat and a running specific squat. They're both squats.
Yeah,
But
no,
but
100%.
yeah, but when you're talking about the, overcoming isometrics for a baseball player, for anyone who doesn't know what that means, just imagine an exercise where you're moving against an immovable object as hard as you can for maybe 5 to 10 seconds. And it's just going to drive your nervous system like through the roof. But then you were talking about long duration kind of, so yielding isometrics, they're the long duration things you can hold for a long time. Most people can imagine like a wall sit, but in your context, you might have them do, I'm guessing, like calf raise holds for the tendons and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of like floating heels, split squat
Sure.
isos. Yeah, a lot of calf raise holds. And then even I utilize them with pitchers as well. Like a lot of like deep, like hands elevated push up isos, like
For the
deep
shoulders and
into
all that.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
into that kind of like horizontal abduction position. But
Yeah.
yeah, like you're saying, I think the craziness of like sports specific training and like how far it goes sometimes has like just completely demonized like sports specificity.
Mhm.
And there is a middle ground and there is a happy medium that I feel like you said, people kind of overlook. And it's just like, no, sports specific is BS, and like just lift the weight and like it'll translate. And it's like to an extent, but like I played with so many guys who could squat 450 and
Mhm.
jump 35 inches in a vert. And then I could do neither of those things and threw 5 miles an hour harder than them. So
Yeah.
it's like at some point there's a give and take. And like you can have someone very strong and very powerful, and they could be still fairly adept at the skill of throwing, but it's
Mhm.
somehow there's a disconnect. Um, I had, I was actually very lucky to train when I retired, he was one of my roommates, one of my really close friends for 2 years, the following 2 seasons. And kind of like those will circle back a bit to the minimum effective dose stuff. I think minimum effective dose is like obviously super important. You don't want to just run your athletes into the ground, but then at the same time, there's like a point where with this client especially, we had like a very frank conversation, and the messaging from his organization was basically, you need to gain like 3 to 4 miles an hour or you probably won't have a job next year. And so it was like, okay, so what have we been doing? What have you done? Okay, that's worked to an extent, but like what can we do differently that's going to move the needle in new ways to try to get you that like untapped miles per hour that you never had before. And so that was a great example of someone who, he didn't rotate very well, which as a pitcher, you need to. So it was like almost everything we did was like somehow biased and in a like rotational or anti-rotational position. He was really freaking strong. So like we didn't need to squat and bench traditionally. I
Mhm.
felt like pretty confident in his base level of strength. So like our main movements, a lot of like rotational landmine presses, a lot of like anti-rotational single arm bench, things like that. Um, and then just moving really freaking fast and throwing that ball a lot, and a lot of contrast pairings, things like that. And yeah, we just had that conversation of like, okay, we're gonna like push you really hard because this is going to be way more than the minimum effective dose. Because at some point, like if we treat this as like a rule number one, do no harm situation, you're not going to get where you need to
Yeah, you have to
go.
make the progress you need to make.
Yeah. And like we're in a position where we really need to put our foot on the gas and like try something and push the limits. And I mean, the next year, his average fastball velocity was 3 miles an hour harder than the previous year.
It's
So
awesome.
it's like these things can work, but it's like you kind of got to pick your spots and know the
Sure.
athlete and
Yeah.
see what the situation is.
They often say you can't ride two horses with one ass. I find that you can, but you just don't go as far in either.
Yeah.
So another conversation is like specialty versus generalization. I personally train for generalization because I don't want to have any physical endeavor where I feel I'm totally unprepared for it. That's just my personality type. But I mean, you look at also that general versus specific argument. You'll see some people where all they're trying to do is be the number one in the world at one thing, and they don't care about the rest. So in that instance, yeah, be as specific as you want. But then I also don't like how people will say that there's the interference effect, that you can't be really strong and fast and really well conditioned because they work against each other. It only works against each other if you're trying to be number one in the world at both. But you can be number like top 5%, but you'll get decathletes. You know, they might not make the 10 people who are going to be in a sprint
Right.
at the Olympics, but they might be pretty darn close in every single event in track and field and all that stuff. So, that's why I just find it's a little these conversations are nuanced. I don't like the all or nothing sort of opinions on both of these. So
Definitely. I couldn't
you don't
agree
need,
more.
yeah, you don't need minimal effective dose on everything. You don't need maximal on everything. Sometimes you want maximal in that situation where you're saying it's to keep your job. Yeah, like pedal to the metal, send it.
Yeah, we got to figure something out.
Sure, but if you're like the starting pitcher and you're deep into playoffs and all that stuff, you're not going to go in the gym and try to crush yourself.
Yeah, you're
So
definitely, yeah,
very
100%.
much context
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah,
Um,
very context specific. And I feel like that's where a lot of things in social media like lose the nuance of
sure,
situations and lose
sure,
that context, and it becomes an all or nothing battle. But to your point on the interference effect, yeah, it matters if you're Usain Bolt. Like, yeah, don't go have him run a 5K,
sure.
right? But just for Bobby down the street who's an
Sure,
accountant and wants to be a hybrid athlete, like, yeah, the interference effect probably is not going to come into play. Like, he can get stronger and he can get generally faster at running
sure,
endurance events. And that's totally good. I feel like, yeah, it's a thing, but it's also, it's a sliding scale, just like what
sure,
you value more in different
sure.
phases of training.
I I don't like gatekeeping in general. Like some people say you can't touch a bar until you can do X amount, like goblet squats. And I get in some instances it's necessary, and others it's not, whatever. But gatekeeping advanced methods, training methods, I kind of understand it a little bit because you have beginners and low intermediates trying to copy what the highest level people are doing, and that's not
Yeah.
what they did when they were there. They did different things at different stages. Like if I copy a 40-year-old LeBron right now, he didn't train when he was 20, how he's training now, but also another thing people don't understand about training is it's all about your genetic like potential. So your floor and your ceiling is set. And what's within your control is how far you are, closer to the floor, closer to the ceiling. And that's what your training can help you achieve, is getting as close to the ceiling as possible. But there are freaks of nature out there that their floor is higher than your ceiling. So I could have trained sprinting, the best sprinting training my entire life, and Usain Bolt could have just been a guy who, you know, plays pickup sports here and there, and I could have taken him on in a race, and he would beat me no matter what because he was born to be better at sprinting. And so
Yeah.
I definitely think that's important. I also find that you were talking about how you're able to be more sport specific, but even then, you were talking about how with some baseball players you might train them different to another, and then that gets into the conversation of athlete specific. That it's not always train everybody the same. And I guess since you do a lot of one on one, it's you have the luxury to do that. But if you're a strength coach with 30 people, you can't really tailor as easily to each individual, and then you focus more on what the sport demand is. Yeah.
Yeah. So I partner with it's a Division III school in Arkansas.
Okay.
I write their strength programming. And basically in this situation, they've got like 50 guys on the roster. And so we went through this is happening remotely. Like, I'm giving them the program and like doing check-ins, and they're kind of carrying and implementing it. So what we did was took all the testing data. I gave them everything I wanted them to run them through. And then I kind of filtered through it and kind of profiled their whole roster into three groups of, we had like the more elastic athletes,
Okay.
the more like expression deficient guys who were plenty strong, but like it didn't transfer. Um, and then your more just plain force deficient athletes, just the guys who just frankly weren't strong enough. And like the
Mhm.
reason that their power numbers weren't there is because they didn't have the basic strength. Through that framework, I was able to then write their programming, and the structure of the session is like very similar. They're doing very similar exercises in each phase, but it's going to be slightly different variations, or like the superset's going to be a little bit different, or like the expression deficient group is going to have, yeah, that overcoming ISO before their squat, whereas the elastic group's not, and things like that. Um, so that was kind of my way of, yes, we're training to the demands of baseball, but also, like you said, just one blanket program for 50
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, everyone will probably get a little bit stronger, but
Yeah, but not
some
as much as
guys,
they could. Yeah.
exactly, some guys will get like improve drastically, and some guys will like barely improve. But it's like, no, we want to set everyone up for success, but I'm also not going to sit here and write 50 different programs. Like, I can't
Yeah. Yeah. It's
do that
not
to myself.
feasible.
So that was kind of the workaround in that situation of like trying to make it as kind of specific, but still a group thing.
I don't know if you listened to the Coach 'em Up podcast, but there was a guest on before, Tim Karen, and he wrote a book. I believe it's called Strength Deficit. I might be mistaken,
Yep.
but he's talking about how he had basically two styles of training for his positions in football. He basically had his big guys who train almost like strong men and all that stuff, and then his fast guys who train like track athletes. And
Yeah.
so he's basically talking about archetypes, and that's a really efficient way to handle big groups. I find that's something that is lacking in group settings. I don't want to like throw CrossFit under the bus, for example. There's a lot of things I like about CrossFit. There's a lot of things I don't like about CrossFit. The one thing I don't like is um, generic programming that applies to everybody,
Yeah.
especially if it's not coached well and whatever. So, not going down that rabbit hole. But if you were able to actually find, different levels or different archetypes, different goals, especially in sports where there's so many different specific, unique positions, then I find that to be really wise, and I appreciate that they do that. I don't know that I've heard of many strength programs on with 50 athletes that do that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean it's yeah, it's a fun opportunity. It's my one of my old pitching coaches from college is now the head coach there, so we had a very close relationship, and he's basically hounded me to come coach for him for the past like 3 years, and I'm not moving to Arkansas. No shade to
Right.
Arkansas, but I'm very happy in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
And finally, this was like our compromise of like, okay, like I want to work with you, I'll work with y'all, but I'm not
Well,
moving there.
one of the questions I was going to ask you is, how has your training philosophy changed over time, and what would you credit it to? Would it be experience, continued education? But I imagine you've gone through a shift.
Yes, man. That's a good question. I would say my programming and like my training philosophy has become a lot more, I guess, power focused.
Okay.
A lot more dynamic in that sense. A lot more contrast work than I used to program like 4 years ago. But I would say the biggest thing for me was not only in my own like playing experience and like the training experiences I had. I was very lucky that I got to train with some like really badass coaches. And like they kind of took on mentor roles with me. Like Andrew Lissy, I'd worked with him while I was in college. He's now one of the main guys at Cressy in Florida. And Kyle
Okay.
Rogers, still very close with. He's been a tremendous mentor of mine. Um, he trained me all through pretty much my entire minor league baseball tenure. He's with the Mets in player development now. Um, and they were also people I could always bounce ideas off of and like ask questions. And then even within the Mariners organization, I was very lucky that I was like very open with our strength staff of like, hey, I got my CSCS. I want to do this. Like, can I pick your brain? And they're like, yeah. So they'd sit down and we'd go through everyone's force plate data and they'd explain to me why they're doing it, what they're doing, how they're using it to program all these things. Um, and they kind of like peeled back the curtain for me and just let me know about like anything I want to and ask any questions. So super thankful for them because I was able to like learn a ton through them and bounce ideas off them and try to figure out like the method of the madness for programming to 150 guys in a minor league organization. And then the past few gyms I've worked at, I think just exposing yourself to different people, um, and been in situations where like all the coaches have slightly different training philosophies. And it's been really fun to pick up certain things from different people that you find valuable and you can fit into your kind of tool belt. And just bounce ideas and see like different styles and what works and what doesn't for my personal style, but doesn't mean it doesn't work for them and their clients, you know? Um, yeah. And I think also, I guess I started training predominantly, well, just only athletes. And I've kind of shifted into training Gen Pop as well, um, which I feel like a lot of people go the other way.
Sure.
And I honestly think like, especially for the in-person stuff, training general population clients has helped me so much in like refining my cueing and
Yeah.
like coaching in the moment. Because like you take a college athlete and you're like, hey, like that's a really squatty RDL, like
Yeah.
hinge more. And they're like, okay. And their hips shift back. And it's just like they have
Yeah.
the proprioception, they can kind of figure it out. But then like with my 62-year-old client, I'm like, hey, hinge more. He's like, what? And he does the exact same thing. It's like, push your hips back. He
Mhm.
does the exact same thing. It's like, all right, how am I going to have to explain this? You know, so it's just
Yeah.
like forcing myself to kind of like troubleshoot more so in the moment. And I feel like I've become, yeah, much better at just cueing different movements and finding different ways to communicate how I want them to move.
I'll speak to the Gen Pop versus athletes thing because my business is called Empower Performance because I originally wanted to work with athletes and I thought, man, I'll just get all the athletes and during the day I'll work with the parents if they work from home or whatever. But then the my business is now probably 90% Gen Pop, 10% athletes, and it's just hard to schedule with the kids around their schedules. But a lot of my clients do work from home anyway. All this to say that I didn't realize how much I would enjoy working with Gen Pop until I did. It's like a puzzle with each individual because they all have
100%.
their different goals and abilities and backgrounds and training history and injury history and all that stuff. But then I learned very quickly too my first experience, I was an intern, like I said, in Cincinnati, and it was mostly baseball guys. And I thought I just want to work with the best athletes at that gym. High school kids that were committed to play, D1 or something like that. And they also had middle school kids who were like awkward. And I found I was getting a lot better at coaching, working with the middle school kids and the high school kids that
Yeah,
didn't need you to be there. They just said, "Give me my sheet of paper and get on my way." And it wasn't nearly as fun to coach them as the middle school kids, where you could see like the dots connect, and it like meant a lot to them. So to be able to do that with Gen Pop is pretty fulfilling. And then the other thing too I would say about that is well, two things. One is it's really, really cool to help an athlete succeed. So I have like a wrestler, and his goal freshman year was to make the varsity team. He did. Sophomore year was to make states. He made state finalist. He was a runner up in wrestling. So that was like really cool, really fulfilling. But I also have clients that have like, you know, improved their health in really drastic ways. Like one lost 80 pounds and got off a CPAP machine, which is like huge,
wow,
So like
yeah,
that's
that's awesome.
means a lot to me, that kind of stuff. And then the other thing I learned was there's different types of learners. You're told this, but you don't really experience it so much with high level athletes. You can just tell them and they'll do it typically. But like you usually think it's auditory and visual, and you have some people that can't even learn with those two. So you can demo all you want and you can tell them all you want. It won't work. So you have to find constraints or some sort of a kinesthetic situation to force
Definitely,
people to feel the right movement, So it's helped me become a better coach, working with all sorts of different people. And also you work with athletes. I would say that there are many ways to train athletes to achieve a goal, but I find it's a smaller selection. There's only so many things you can do to get where you're trying to get. It takes what it
right.
takes. With Gen Pop, I find the enjoyment factor is huge. If they don't have very specific goals, they just generally want to be a little stronger, a little more mobile, a little better conditioning, maybe better power, better body composition, whatever. There's so many ways you can do it, and enjoyment is a huge factor there. They have to want to do it so that they keep paying you. It is a service at the end of the day. So yeah, I
Definitely,
find that to be interesting.
yeah. When they're training, like we were talking about earlier, they're training just to train, right? They're not training for their sport. It's just, yeah, training for health. But man, you touched on something. I was gonna ADD kicking in, slipped my
Oh,
mind.
no
But
worries. Was it the learning styles, auditory,
it was
visual,
right
kinesthetic?
before that, I
Right
think.
before that, huh? I was talking about the client who like lost 80 pounds in the CPAP machine. If it was maybe that, talking about like
It'll
the
come
different.
back to me probably in
No
10
worries.
minutes.
Yeah, if it comes back, feel free to interrupt at any point and just bring it up. Um, I wanted to ask you some more specific questions now, because you're talking about how you train differently for endurance running versus baseball. And one of my clients had a lot of baseball questions, big baseball guy,
All
and
right.
so he has a son who is in football, and he wants to start baseball. But when he throws it, he was describing him as whipping it, and getting a lot of like elbow issues from that. He throws it almost like a football, and it's a different throwing mechanic. So he was asking how to teach proper mechanics to his son, but also are there exercises that you typically use to help people with throwing distance and velocity? And then are there any exercises that you really like to use for elbow health and shoulder health?
Okay.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay. Um, I think number one for if I was just gonna like spam um an exercise or a couple exercises just for overall like shoulder and elbow health.
Okay.
Um, I've been on a big dead hang and handstand kick. I think just getting that overhead, not only like shoulder mobility, but also like stability and handstand. And then on the dead hang, just like being
Take
able to,
reflection.
yeah, get that kind of like range of motion in there and just hanging saved. Like, honestly, I feel like extended my career by a full year with
Yeah.
the shoulder issues I was having by the end. And then with hanging, obviously, like the grip factor as well is really big. Um, but if how old did you say he is?
He's 14.
Okay. I would say this is probably a situation where like GPP would be king and just like getting him overall stronger upper body wise. In terms of like the throwing mechanics piece, the I think what people don't realize enough is that when you throw a baseball, everyone throws sidearm. It's just a matter of how much, what like angle your torso's at.
Okay.
So like if you take like a freeze frame of a pitcher who's like completely over the top where you think he's throwing like this, he's just here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Versus if you look at Max Scherzer where it's like he's pretty dead sidearm, his shoulders are more square to the ground, so his arm is more square to the ground. So I
Interesting.
think the way you flow into that scap retraction, elbow
Mhm.
spiral, and deliver the baseball happens in a more similar way than people realize across the board. It just happens here or happens
Yeah, depending
there.
on your torso. I mean, that's really interesting. I never really paid attention to that.
Yeah, so some of like the weird, like little nuance stuff.
Yeah,
But
that's cool.
so yeah, I think a lot of people, especially at that age, they get just like really pushy with it. And like elbow can lead in a weird way instead of
Mhm.
letting that hand flow. And like when the elbow goes, you want to fall into that external rotation, right? Rather than just like getting pushy and like you're throwing a dart.
Interesting.
Um, so yeah, I can after this, I can send you a few like specific throwing drills and
Sure,
stuff
sure, sure. Yeah.
that he can kind of like incorporate in different like plyo stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned well, baseball strength and conditioning is really impressive and interesting. And actually, a lot of my guests that I'm going to have on, and you included, have baseball backgrounds and all that stuff. Do you have any baseball coaches that you look up to, baseball strength coaches that you look up to in particular? I know you mentioned Kyle Rogers.
Yeah,
Um,
Raj has been, yeah, like I said, he's a close friend of mine. He's an incredible mentor to me. He's awesome. I learned so much from working with him. He actually is the one who turned me on to Prescript and like doing
okay,
starting
cool.
those courses. And I think that is one of the best continuing education groups out there for our industry. Joe Padula is
Yeah, it's
phenomenal.
great.
The
Yeah,
stuff he's putting out there. And yeah, I think a lot of his stuff especially transcends just like the baseball, softball, rotational space. Like he does so much of like the speed development stuff as well, which is really cool. Um, and then on just like the baseball specific side, yeah, Bryce Kreider at Driveline, he does some awesome work. He's, I believe, their lead high performance trainer now. I used to work for Driveline as a remote trainer. When I was doing that, he was like their strength intern. So it's really been cool to see his growth over the last like 5 years through them. Uh, yeah, he's a weapon. He went from, um, I think he had elbow issues. He was a pitcher and then ended up going to the University of Washington and throwing the javelin.
oh wow.
So like
Yeah,
throwing
yeah.
becomes throwing, but just very different. But it's
Different
just,
throwing.
he's
Sure.
got a really cool approach to his training as well.
Yeah, if anybody listening isn't aware of how insane javelin throwers, shot putters, all those throwers are, I mean, just look up their gym workouts. I mean, look at their sport specific training, their actual sport practice. Just look at the gym workouts they're doing. It is unreal. You would think that they were like these NFL, athletes and all that stuff, just based on how freakish they are.
Yeah, it's
But yeah,
wild.
for sports like that, skill obviously matters. But I find there's some sports where there's less of a tactical and technical component, so they can actually prioritize the physical side a lot more. And for those sports, that's where you find truly the highest level athletes, in my opinion, in terms of what the body's physically capable of. I mean, I would say that not just on the speed and power side. So, like, people think of Usain Bolt as a freak, but you also look at the people that swim across the English Channel back and forth several times in a row, or run 90 miles in 24 hours or something like that, and then ultras.
Yeah.
And there's some absolute monsters out there. So, another question I had was you mentioned your continuing education, Prescript. Do you have any books, podcasts, continued education like certifications that you would recommend to someone who's maybe getting started off in this industry and they wanna learn like you did?
Yeah, I think Prescript's level one course is
Mm,
just I think having a foundation as a coach of like functional anatomy and applied biomechanics is
okay.
so valuable. And I think that can really set you apart in a room full of coaches, or if you're in a gym, like if you understand the way things work a little bit more. You don't have to know everything about the client or the sport or anything like that. But if you're like with that knowledge, I feel like you were saying earlier, this is what you said that I wanted to talk about. You said everybody's a puzzle. This is exactly what I'm
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about. So when you're able to like with this knowledge and the tools from a course like that, and you're able to think critically and kind of problem solve on the spot and figure out what you want to do. And I think that goes for your Gen Pop
Mhm.
clients or your athletes. Like everybody is a puzzle. That's one of the reasons I love this job is every client's problem solving. And I think that course helps me with my problem solving abilities significantly. Podcasts. You mentioned Coach 'em Up. I'm a big fan of that one. Prescript has one. RX Radio. I listen to that one religiously as well. Um, and then in terms of books, I think there's so much out there
Mhm.
information wise that I feel like just whatever you're
Yeah,
like whatever
interested.
you feel like is the low hanging fruit or whatever you feel like is an area of opportunity, like there's going to be a book about it. Like when I started running, I went on and I looked at strength training for running books, and Westside Barbell has a strength training for runners book. I bought it and read it. There's a book called Force. It's kind of like it's got like a cartoon of Isaac Newton on the cover. You can get it on Amazon, and it's like a kind of like a almost like biomechanics for dummies, and it's like biomechanics for strength training. And then they had like a second or third volume that is like specifically for running.
Mm.
So I got that as well, and just finding those books that kind of like fill in the gaps of knowledge where I need those gaps filled. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a book for just about anything at this point, and different social media accounts as well are super knowledgeable. Um, I'm going through a book right now. I think it's called How We Learn to Move.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna get that. That's on my
yeah,
list.
it's a super cool one. Yeah, like you were talking about, like constraints led approach earlier, things like that. It's been a pretty fun one.
That's so when I was a soccer coach, one of the things that I really tried to pay attention to was not overcomplicating drills and teaching people the nuances within the drills themselves. So you could even just give someone like a constraint, make them play the game, but say that if they score with this type of a setup, they get an extra 2 points or something like that, and see how the kids can work it in, as opposed to just setting up the cones and say this is the only way you get to score, and just
Yeah,
run that play over and over again. You let them figure it out in a realistic scenario. In jujitsu, there's a kind of debate between they call it ecological and they call it like skills training and all that stuff, skills practice. So it's just people that will either just say, I'm going to go for this choke, I'm going to go for this submission. And you just do it, over and over again. Your partner's kind of like a dummy. Maybe they add a little bit of resistance. I find that's very good for learning the movement initially, but then if you don't know when to apply it, you're not
yeah,
adding IQ aspect to it. And some people complain with the ecological side of things that you're not mastering the movement first well enough that you'd ever be able to hit it if you just give them a game right off the bat. So I find that yeah, lots of ways to learn how to move, but there's the uh, how to apply it and then the when and where to apply it. And so I find all that stuff to be fun, but I kind of very much disliked lazy coaching, hearing cues. They hear all the time, and it doesn't mean anything to the kid. So, like, if a kid kicks a ball over the bar, everybody says that they were leaning back when they shot it. So they say lean forward, or they say knee over the ball. I can kick a ball leaning forward over the bar. I can not have my knee over the ball, and I can keep it down. So the fact that you're using this like one very lazy cue in all situations drives me insane. You even see it like the highest level. Sometimes commentators will be like, "Oh, he leaned back when he shot the ball." They'll show a replay and they'll see the guys like leaning forward. Just drives me crazy. But I always like teaching. You were talking about like the nuance of throwing. I feel like that's why it's so important to actually do the thing before you coach. You can be a great athlete and terrible coach, don't get me wrong, but if you're a good coach and you have the experience added into that, you can teach someone something that maybe another coach who never played the sport could understand because they wouldn't have felt it. They wouldn't have
yeah.
discovered it themselves. So yeah, that's great.
And I don't even think you need to be that good at the task to be able to coach it, but
Yeah,
you at least need to know what it feels like and need to know what the position you want them to get into feels like, and like relatively be able to get into that. Like you're talking about with that soccer analogy, that made me think of like the classic like youth baseball lesson one with the pitcher. It's just like get your back leg. It's like to a 12-year-old, it's like, what does that even mean?
yeah.
Like, do you want them to sink and sit into it? Do you want them to drive off of it? Do you want
Mhm.
them to hinge? Do you want them to squat? It's just, yeah, it's just lazy cueing. I'm just like, oh, just get in your back leg. You weren't in your leg. And it's like, that kid has no idea what that means. I don't even know what you mean by that. You
You
know,
must have
you
heard.
don't even know what you mean.
You must have heard run on the balls of your feet to get faster, like all the time, as if that's the
Oh
only
yeah,
thing sprinting. I'm like, that drives me crazy. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but that was definitely one thing that I didn't like. I could tell pretty early on who was a good coach or a bad coach based on if they used the same thing that everybody else said, and they used it as kind of like across the board as the other person would use it as well. One of the rules in soccer is play the way you face, and I hated that. So they basically say just like if you don't know what's behind you, don't play in that direction. There's times where, for the sake of deception, you want to act like you don't know that your defender's behind you. They're going to come step really hard, and at least face behind them. So like, I'd rather teach a kid it's like you do whatever you want. You'll
yeah.
realize that in some situations this is better, and that situation it's not. And if you make a mistake, it's fine. What can you learn from it? So I think that's, in my opinion, that's true coaching. It's not just I have an idea of how everyone's supposed to play, and you have to do it exactly as I say it. It's what is the kid understanding? How can I help them fill the gaps? And my favorite part of coaching from a tactical level actually was when a player would do. I had a better view than the kids generally. It was when a kid would do something I wouldn't have thought of, and it would have worked. Because I'm like, man, that's great. That's why I'm glad I just shut my mouth and let him play.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, I mean, they see the field in a different angle. They have different instincts, different strengths. So that's one of the beauty of sports, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, and I think like you were talking about, I think just like a huge red flag for coaching is if they say the exact same cue to everyone, right? Like everyone everyone not only moves differently, but like they're not going to understand that cue the same way. So like
Mhm,
when I see coaches like cue a movement throughout the day three
mhm.
different ways to three different clients, I'm like, that's the mark of a good coach. Like they found a different way to explain it that that client specifically will understand.
I find myself using analogies a lot to try to explain things to people. Um, Like if I want someone to rotate from their upper body but not their lower body, because I'm sure you've seen that a ton where if someone has like a GoPro on their chest and their belt buckle, both will be facing the same direction the whole time. They get no dissociation. So I'll just
Right.
tell them your belt buckle has to face forward the whole time. You got a GoPro on your chest on a panoramic. And like for whatever reason, that kind of analogy just helps people to understand the actual movement that I'm trying to get them to create. If not,
Yeah,
it's
I like that.
so. I was gonna ask, what feels like a win in your job? What feels like a touchdown?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I don't know. I think wins come in a lot of different ways. Like obviously when like I just had a client finish the Berlin Marathon this weekend. That was a huge win, you know. Um, I had another client just qualify for the Boston Marathon. Got that news. So it's like those are obviously like bigger wins. But then on a smaller level, like on a daily day to day basis, it can be just, hey, we've been struggling to figure out a hinge and it clicked today. Or um, obviously just like little PRs in the gym with clients, things like that, especially if it is a Gen Pop client where like training is the thing we're doing. Um, yeah, I think it just comes in all kinds of different ways and forms based on like who it is. And but I think that's one thing that's really rewarding about this job is just about every day there's you can find a win for somebody, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's like, hey, the weight was the same, but like the quality of movement was way up, or we went 10 pounds heavier than we did last week, or we're graduating from like a split squat to a referred elevated split squat.
Mhm.
Like we're gonna progress. Like congrats, you did it. Here's your graduation cap. This is gonna be harder. It's it's just like trying to find those wins. And I think especially with the Gen Pop clients, like celebrating those and like making them more aware of them as well. So it's not just like you're talking about, just like training day in, day out, just keeping them engaged with like, hey, like congrats, we got to this. You haven't done that before. This is awesome.
I think, kind of along those lines too, I like to tell my clients that every day there's a victory. It's either going to be physical or mental, because
Mhm.
there's days where you're feeling fresh and you're going to be able to crush some weight and see the number go up, and other days where maybe you didn't have the best sleep, maybe you didn't have the best nutrition, maybe you have stress in life outside of it. Maybe you went so hard in the session before that you weren't fully recovered going into the next one. You never know what the reason is, but then they're going to look at like a piece of paper or what their stats were the week before, think, man, like, what's wrong with me? Like, there's nothing wrong with you. You showed up, there's a fluctuation. I think the range is up or down 15%. So total 30%
Yeah,
day to day is pretty enormous, especially when you get into big numbers. And so I tell people, like, it fluctuates. It's not always your fault. Sometimes, I mean, if you eat terribly, sleep terribly, you're hungover, all that stuff, that's very different than you're doing everything right and you still have those natural fluctuations. But the days where you show up and you get the job done anyway, I think that's actually the key to success, because anybody can work out on the day they're feeling good.
yeah,
But to be successful, you have to work out on the days you're not feeling good, even if it means sometimes reducing the weight, reducing the volume, whatever it means. To me, that's a like an emotional or like a moral victory more than a physical victory. So,
for sure. Yeah, sometimes a huge win is just showing up and like checking the box of the session,
mm,
and not check the box like go through the motions, but just
sure.
like being there, being present, like you're talking about when it's not ideal, when things are crazy, when you don't have much to give, but you're still there giving it.
Mm,
Um, yeah, wins can come in all forms.
okay. Another question I was going to ask is, are there any positive trends in the industry, and then also any pet peeves that you've noticed in the industry?
Oh gosh. Um, in the industry as a whole, I would say positive trends. Yeah, I think the whole like training like an athlete for general population clients, I think that's been an awesome kind of movement that's starting to grow. Um, I think the biggest positive though is I think social media can be such a negative place, but I think in our industry, it's been a really cool space of collaboration and like bringing people together, and like the amount of coaches, like like-minded coaches that I've been able to connect with, like even meeting you through this, through social media, things like that, um, I think it's been really cool to see how that's grown
Mm.
and how people are able to connect from across the country, working with like slightly different populations and apply different things. And um, yeah, I think it's just been a really cool space for people to collaborate and learn from each other. Pet peeves. Well, um, how much time do we got?
Uh,
um, I think, yeah, we touched on it earlier. I think the whole like sports specificity is BS. GPP is the only way to go is a bit of a pet peeve. And just, yeah, that whole all or nothing mentality, um, is probably my biggest one. Um, well, actually, no, that's my biggest one is the, like when Tyrese Halliburton, tore his
oh my
Achilles.
gosh.
And
Oh
it's
my
just
God.
like,
Yeah.
people taking injuries and using them as justification for their training style. And it's like, if he trained with me and did these two exercises, he wouldn't have tore his Achilles. Like, you're so full of shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's crazy.
uh, it's so scummy. It's
It is.
just so wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's lots of
Yeah.
names we can name, and it's always the same people that probably have the most BS styles of training that make the biggest, most outlandish claims and swear that they're better than actual trainers who know what they're talking about and doing and all that stuff. And I think the one thing that's really dumb is people just forget how violent and chaotic sports are sometimes. And then it's a kind of a pet peeve along those lines. I'm not naming names here. It's not like anyone who uses this term is bad, but the whole bulletproofing thing drives me
Oh,
crazy
crazy.
because
Yes.
anybody can get injured. Do you know what I mean? You can reduce the likelihood of injury, but like no one's actually Superman. If you say bulletproof and I shoot you with a gun and you bleed, you're not bulletproof. So like
Yeah. I don't
that
care
drives
how
me
many
crazy.
ISOs you do. If I shoot you, you're going to bleed. Like, it doesn't matter.
That's crazy. Um,
Yeah. No,
I
that's
liked
one for sure.
I liked your positive trend. In fact, I think it was very similar. I had a guest yesterday, and I'll try to upload both your podcasts this weekend if I get the time for it. But he was saying that there's a lot more sprinting and jumping, a lot more athleticism in today's training, especially in Gen Pop, but even just in general, you find even maybe 10 years ago that strength athletes might just be trained by barbell background coaches. You just get a lot of like Olympic movements and powerlifting, maybe some bodybuilding as the background, but those were like the big three. And there wasn't enough speed and agility and iMetrics and stuff like that in these athletes programs. And they said, "Oh, we're not going to sprint them because they're getting enough sprinting in their sport practice," which I think is kind of negligent because you're not actually preparing them for the sport or helping them improve as well as they could. Um, but yeah, I think it's becoming a bigger thing. And then also along those lines too, and I think you can attest to this. I think endurance is becoming more popular with strength people. It's always been around, but
Yeah.
you find that it's always been endurance people who never want to touch weights and strength people who like don't want cardio to kill their gains. You're seeing a lot of really jacked, really strong people starting to get into running, and it's just good for their heart and their lungs and their overall performance and recovery. So I think that's another positive trend.
Yeah, for sure.
People might not know. Look, I'm gonna have you plug your Instagram at the end. They should look up your profile, but you're jacked and you're strong and all that stuff. But you're also super fit, so you can have all of it at once. So what was it yesterday that you posted? Was it you doing the 315 back squat
No,
thing?
so it's funny we're talking about this. That's one of my very good friends and one of my coworkers. He's a coach as well. Um, and he came to me like 2 months ago and he was like, "Hey, I want to start buying training from you." Because he's like powerlifting background. He's really freaking strong. And he's like, "I want to get more explosive and I've never done that stuff. I don't train the way you train. Like, I want to do it." I was like, "All right, let's do it." So we're like a month in and it's been really cool seeing just, yeah, he's like the classic. We were talking about bucketing earlier, like expression deficient. Like he
Mhm.
squats over 400 pounds, but his
Yeah, he
vert
can't.
isn't
Yeah.
great, and he's like trying to figure out, okay, like how do we enhance that stretch shortening cycle so you can utilize that eccentric component? How can we improve rate of force development? And it was really funny with what I posted yesterday. I told him we're going to start at 135 and we're going to keep adding weight until you can no longer jump with the
Yeah.
bar. And his first set at 135 moved like a normal squat. Like he just like squatted. And I was like, I don't think you heard me. And he's my very good friend, so I could talk like this to him. But I was like, I want you to freaking jump, like
Yeah.
jump. And he's like, okay. I was like, that was not fast. And so he like jumps with it. I was like, thank you. Okay. So then we just like add weight on and going back at the end. Yeah. He's doing 315, like leaving the ground a little bit. Like
Yeah.
he's moving fast. He's getting explosive. And we went back and I showed him the video of the 315. And I was like, compared to where you started at 135, 315 moved faster than 135. You just
Yeah.
like trying to like figure that out and unlock
Yeah.
that. So that was like a really fun one. Um, but yeah, I've been getting him jumping and sprinting a little bit.
I'm curious if accommodating resistance would help him with like a mental component, because it's only 135 on his back. Does he think that like he's going to shoot it to the moon or something like that? You know what I mean? I have no clue, but he's got the
So
power.
the funny thing is he thought he was moving fast.
Okay.
Because when I was like, move fast, he was like, I did. I was like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, no. They're like, I'm watching you. I don't. He was like, it felt fast. I don't know. But then once he like actually moved fast, he was like, oh, that's what moving fast feels like.
I think BBT in that instance would just be useful purely for the
For
metric,
sure.
and even the gamification. If you just say, I want you to say above this number, zero point 0.4, for example, and we just go as heavy as we can, or we can still stay above that number. It teaches them to be violent with their expression and all that stuff. And eventually it's
Definitely.
going to see the point. Exactly. So, I was talking about this in yesterday's podcast too, talking about like tech in the gym and all that stuff. It's only as cool as you allow it to be. If you just
Yeah.
squat with a DBT every single session and you don't know what the information is or how to use it or how to use it to inform decisions or something like that, then cool. You just spend a bunch of money on a box with a cord. But if you
Yeah.
actually know how to using it, it's cool. It can be used for auto regulation. It can be used for like what you're talking about, trying to hit certain forces and at certain speeds. I mean, I have a jump mat, a sprint watch, rate monitor, BBT, and all that stuff. And like, there's times where I find if I'm just trying to get meat and potatoes workouts, I don't touch it at all. But if I have a decision, uh, that I'm trying to have informed or something like that, or I'm trying to get some real time feedback, it's a really cool tool to use. But I do think it's a
Yeah.
bit of a luxury item. At the end of the day, you could be the smartest person in the world with all the tech and still not know how to coach somebody, in the trenches, for lack of better words.
No, definitely. And I think I see it a lot with force plates, especially like you're talking about, where it's like, oh, we do force plate testing. And it's like, cool, show me how you use that to inform your programming. It's like, no, they jumped on it. And I was like, it's just a glorified jump mat at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. A really
Um,
expensive, really cool jump mat. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And just a marketing ploy.
Yeah.
But no, I
Well,
think,
yeah.
yeah, having the instant feedback on like a VBT or a jump mat or force plates, things like that are, yeah, super awesome and valuable tools to, yeah, make a session way more engaging. Especially if it's like a group setting, make it like easily make it
Oh,
a
yeah.
competition. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
everybody gets fired up with it. Yeah.
Jump mat or sprint gates, and you get a group of teenagers sprinting or someone jumping. Like, yeah, I was talking about this yesterday too, but it's like you can tell somebody to do 5 sprints without gates on their own. They'll do the sprints and they'll go do the workout. You get the gates out and you get a bunch of buddies and all that stuff, and they'll want to do the whole workout just sprinting. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
one of the
100%.
benefits about that. Um, this isn't going to be something that like any of my clients or family members would understand if I ask you, but someone in the field would understand what I'm going to ask you. Have you ever gotten your hands on a Proteus, like one of those big machines?
Okay.
Tech?
So it's funny you say that. No, I've never used one, but in, geez, what was this? I guess this was 2020, like right before COVID hit, right before spring training and everything. I actually went down to Cressy in Florida for the weekend, and when I was there, their Proteus was getting delivered. And
That's
so I
awesome.
like, that was the first time I ever saw it. And they were like kind of unboxing it and like trying to figure it out and things like that and get like the orientation on it. So I'd never seen it before until then, but I've never
It's
used
so
one now.
futuristic. It's so cool. That's one of the I'm not trying to complain. I love my gym. I got a nice 2-car garage gym. I got a lot of great stuff. It's probably better than, almost everybody else's home gym at this level. And there's some that like blow me out of the water. Don't get me wrong. Like there's some things that like I'll never have a chance to get my hands on, because
Yeah.
it's so expensive. You need so much space and all that stuff. So it's like if I ever get the chance, like I don't have uh, a Versa climber. I don't have, all the Exos performance kind of equipment and all that stuff. Coolest thing I have is a flywheel, which is awesome, but
Flywheels are awesome.
they're
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. But,
Big fan.
but yeah, I mean, so it's just fun to be able to talk to somebody about this who understands and can appreciate it. Um, so we're coming up on time. The last thing I wanted to ask is, do you have any parting pieces of advice for someone who wants to follow in your footsteps or for a young athlete? And you can answer both if you'd like.
Yeah, I think both can be summarized. Just have a growth mindset.
Yes.
Just be brutally honest with yourself about what your strengths and weaknesses are, and try to address the weaknesses. Yeah, like we said earlier, I think in this age of information, like there's going to be a book, a podcast, a social media post about just about anything. I mean, with ChatGPT, if you don't understand anything we talked about, you can literally type into it, explain rate of force development to me like I'm a kindergartner, and it will do a pretty good job of that. Like there's so many tools at our fingertips right now to learn and to grow individually, like professionally, things like that. And I think just continual growth and like trying to become the best coach possible is something that like I will always strive to do. And I think is just so important. In my opinion, it's the mark of a good coach is someone who's constantly trying to learn. Um, yeah, if my programming looks identical to this in 5 years, then I probably am doing a disservice to both myself and my clients. So, yeah, I just think, yeah, having a growth mindset and trying to find the ways that you can continually improve.
I 100% agree with that. I appreciate that advice. For anyone listening, I hope you appreciate that too. Along those lines, I also want to say you talked about all the different forms of information that are available at our disposal, ChatGPT especially. I think
Yeah,
ChatGPT is like the best and the worst thing, again, depending on how you use it. If you use it
definitely.
to never critically think, then there's no point, in existing.
For sure. For
Just
sure.
ridiculous. It can help, same thing, inform decisions, get information, at least a summarized version at your fingertips really quickly and easily and all that stuff. But same thing with like, you did so many things of continued ed. I would imagine that some of them conflicted with each other. And at some point you had to ask yourself which one you believed in and why. And that's probably a
Yeah,
huge thing for a coach too, is to critically analyze. You could find studies conflicting on almost every single claim,
100%.
in strength and conditioning and all that stuff. So, the last thing I was going to ask is, where can people find you if they want to find you?
Yeah, pretty much Instagram is it. Gwiggy Smalls, Guiggy Smalls. That's it. Yeah.
It's one of
Um,
the
um,
most fun names, by the way, I've seen on Instagram.
yeah, it's
And I wonder if it goes over people's heads.
I think with this generation it kind of does.
Yeah, as it
Um
should.
when I made it, it was like everyone was like, "Oh, that's sick." But now it's like I don't think anyone gets it.
That's funny. That's really funny. Well, I appreciate you. Thank you very much for your time. If
Yeah,
you ever
of
want to
course,
hop
man.
on your podcast again, you let me know. I'll set it up. But yeah, thank you very
Yeah.
much.
No, thanks for having me. This is a good time.
Yep, cool.